Today's conversation is about money, but not in the way we usually talk about it. Because for many women, the biggest financial risk isn't what's in their bank account. It's what they don't fully see, understand, or feel ownership of. There are countless women who are deeply involved in building a life, raising families, contributing to businesses, and yet they still feel disconnected from the financial decisions that shape their future. Not because they aren't capable, but because somewhere along the way we were conditioned to trust, to defer, or to avoid conversations that feel uncomfortable. And often we don't realize the impact of that until something big changes. And then we're forced to step into a level of awareness and responsibility we were not prepared for. Today we're talking about those hidden vulnerabilities, why we avoid these conversations, and what it really looks like to step into financial awareness and ownership before a crisis forces it. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm Debra, your host. Today's guest is Anna Felix, a smart money strategist who helps women move from fear to uncertainty into financial clarity and confidence. Anna's work is deeply personal. After becoming a widow, she experienced firsthand the fear and uncertainty that can come from not fully understanding your financial situation. And she turned that experience into a mission to help other women feel empowered, informed, and secure. Anna, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to see you again.
Thank you so much, Debra. I really appreciate you having me. It's great to get together.
It really is, and I'm excited for our conversation. We talk a lot about scarcity mindset and all the mindset things that happen to us when we're trying to make money and build our businesses. And something that really touched me when you and I talked originally is what you went through after your husband died. And I found that really important, that there's a lot of women out there who just don't understand what's happening in the life. They don't even know where to begin when something big happens. So tell us a little bit first about your story, and then we'll dive into all the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I say, I really tell my story today because I don't want other women to be in the same situation. And that's the whole idea, turning that pain into the purpose of making it so that as many women as possible are not caught off guard. And it was just a matter of, my husband passed away, and prior to that, we'd had a car accident, 5 years of trying to recover from all that. I had a husband and daughter with brain injuries, and your thoughts are just, getting through the next day, all the things that are involved with that. And that is the same with everyone today, right? Like, we're busy, we're working, we have all the things going on. There's just a plethora of things happening, and we just don't take the time to think about what the future could hold and what could happen. And I feel like often people feel like, oh, if I talk about that, if we talk about what would happen if one of us passed away, like that's a bad thing. Like they're gonna feel like, I'm wanting something to happen. We have all these things that we may potentially think about, but at the end of the day, I always say it is such a love letter to our family if we have these conversations because, my husband and I have life insurance. We didn't have enough because of our situation with, having to sell the business and having had the car accident and all the things that happened. We really hadn't sat down and talked about, the financial future, like how are we going to pay for all of these things? Like what was the plan moving forward? And then he passed away. And so it was like we had some things in place, but definitely not enough. I always tell clients today, like nobody ever said, oh, I have too much life insurance once something happens, right? We may have that conversation and that concept before, but certainly not after something has occurred. Of course, in that moment of the grief and all the difficult difficulty, the 5 years of thinking that we were moving forward and we really weren't, and his recovery wasn't what we thought it would be. All these financial questions are coming up like, what am I going to do now? I'm in all this debt, and what's going to happen, and do I stay in this house? Do I move? Like, there's so many things that come up, and you're just not ready to answer all those things, even on a really good day, right? Like, not when you're not dealing with the grief and the stress and all of that. And in my particular situation, my mother passed away 39 days after my husband. So
Oh,
it was, 2 funerals in 40 days. I mean, it was just so, so much. And so that is the thing, is where do you start? Where do you start putting the pieces together? What is the first step that you need to take? And you really want to just, be in bed with the blanket over your head and not even have to think about any of these things. But some of them, some decisions you do need to make right away. I always tell clients now, try not to make any major decisions immediately following that, because how you feel now will definitely change as time goes by. So the more time you give yourself, the better. But, it is just the situation that you find yourself in. And so that is why, for yourself and for your loved ones, the more you have these conversations before the stress and the grief and all of those things are coming in, the better, because you're clear headed and you are thinking about, well, would I really stay here? What can we keep the home? Like, all those things are determined by the coverages and the things that you have in place prior to that. And I know often, that's the thing. You just wish, like, oh, I wish I could just ask my spouse, like, what he thought about this or that, or,
or your mom. Your mom was gone too. I mean,
yeah,
that was my go-to person, and losing her was really difficult for me to get
yeah.
through, and was really the catalyst that caused me to change my life. So you had both missing.
Yes. And they were my
And
2 people. Yeah, they were definitely my 2 people. And so, that just makes it so, so difficult. And so that is the power of embracing having these conversations now, when you do have them and when you can find out all of these things. As I share this with clients, they say when they go take the recommendation and they go have the conversation, and I say, make it an enjoyable time. Like, have some wine and cheese and sit down and say, I heard this story today of someone that expressed the anguish and the stress that was involved. And it just really made me realize that I don't want that to be our story, and I don't want that to happen to us. And no one that's used that has ever come back and said, yeah, that didn't work. Like, it wasn't successful, but rather they say, wow, my spouse or my parent, whoever I'm trying to help, plan for the future, was like, well, I'm really glad, I value us enough to be like, man, I don't want them to have, that difficulty and have to make those decisions. And together we should talk about them and at least start the conversation. Like, it doesn't have to be a one and done, but it's just like, this is something that's really important, and I want to talk about it. And so it can really make such a huge difference.
so you were really thrust into that situation by a tragedy, by a death. But there's also a lot of women out there that are in a situation where they don't just have a lot of control over their financial situation. And sometimes it's because their husband doesn't want to, but sometimes it's kind of an avoidance thing.
Hmm.
What, and it ends up oftentimes you don't know until sometimes that bad thing that happens isn't a death, it's a divorce. And now you don't have any of the information and you're seeking it and you don't even know what to look for. Do you see women that are in that situation as well? And what can we do to help have that conversation even when it's really uncomfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, a lot of times it's a divorce situation or something else happens. Sometimes women find out that, their husband has a gambling problem or some
Yes, that's
other
what
thing.
happened to me.
Yeah, yeah. And or, some other thing that comes up, or a bad business deal. I talked to someone recently. He had a bad business deal that he did not disclose, and, put their home in on trying to pay for it, and then that didn't work, and they were literally about to lose their home when she found out that any of this had happened. So I always say in a relationship, communication is super important about everything. It's the foundation for trust. And finances has to be part of that. Like on some level, however, if that hasn't been the foundation that you've built upon before, then you need to introduce it because it is so important. And just like in these other situations, in this case, there were other options that that husband could have done short of, putting their home on the line to pay this off, but he just wasn't aware of it. And he wasn't aware of it because he hadn't talked about it. Right. And so
Hmm.
things, none of us know everything about everything. And counseling and talking about these things and getting ideas from other people is what it's all about, right? I mean, we do that in other areas of our life. Oh, I'm throwing this party. Where do you think I should? Like we openly seek recommendations, right, from people about other things. And it should all be that in finances and with money. And to your point, for whatever reason, there's a taboo about it. Maybe it's how we were raised, or, some women feel like, I went from my father taking care of my finances. I got married and now it was my husband. And I've never had a part in it. But
And I kind
this,
of like it that way. I mean, I think that it's relieving to not have that stress, right?
yeah,
You see the dad or the husband feels stress about whatever, and you assume that that's something I don't want to have to be involved in. And if he can take care of that, great. But he's not always going to be there. And avoiding that conversation in the current, you're just shoving it down, you have in the back of your mind, right? I
yeah,
don't think anybody's just completely oblivious that I probably should know, but bringing it up is
yeah.
difficult. And I think they feel really disconnected from it. Like, it's just not it's not in the right? If you're in the Venn diagram, it should be in the part that's in the middle that you both share, but it's not. It's not in your part at all.
Yeah.
And even when they're really involved in building it, they still will be off of it. They may have like some vague thing. Why do you think that that mindset really exists? Is it really cultural? Is it religion? Is it because there's a certain amount of dogmatic Christianity that's very male household driven?
Mhm.
And I think, is that part of it too?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those factors that you mentioned can definitely contribute to it. And, it is going to depend a little bit on your culture. I know there are a lot of cultures where, the woman, it does not participate in any of the financial things. But at the end of the day, whatever the reasons are, it's time. We do many things. We've changed many ways the way we do things. We communicate differently. We have cell phones. We have cameras on our cell phones. All of these things are different. They're modern, and we've changed in those things. And we have to change in the way that we deal with finances and money as well. And so, when prices of things go up, the family has to come together and, how are we going to make up for these differences? How are we going to deal with that? And those are all things that need to be addressed. And so whether it's the religion or the culture or just our family, whatever that is, we need to say, you know what? I've had to make a lot of changes in modern life regarding other things. And this is just something that I feel like we need to adopt because either one of us, we're talking about the woman being oblivious, but there are a fair number of men out there that, don't pay the bills and don't know the financial situation either. And so this applies to both. Like if you are in a relationship and you are not aware of like what's coming in monthly, what's going out, what the plans are for the future, what kind of coverages you have, then you really need, male or female, however that looks, it's fine. We can play to our strengths and that's great. If you've agreed that, wife pays all the bills and all of those things, that's fine. But, I would say a quarterly check-in to see where things are at. And it just makes so much sense on so many levels. Often one of the things I talk about when people are trying to find extra money to put aside for their future, it's like, do you know what's been coming out of your bank account, in the last 3 months? Like, how many memberships are you paying for things that you're not even using, right? And these are things that you are not going to find out about unless you are checking in and seeing what's actually going on. And so it can save you money, you can find more money. These type of conversations can make such a huge difference, and we just again, we're busy, we're focused on other things, different times of the year, we're focused on different things, now we're going into school coming out and vacations and all of those things, which are amazing, and we wanna spend time doing that, but they all have kind of a financial component to them, right? And so if we're going to do those things in a comfortable manner, not just having to put it on the card, but because we've been coming together and we've been putting money aside for this, all of those things come together much smoother if we're having the conversations and we're knowing what's going on. And like I say, all of the people that I've spoken with and different couples that before were not having the conversation, it really is surprisingly enough as simple as just, I heard this thing and I realized, wow, we kind of fall in that. Like we've kind of let that happen. And I really don't want that to be our situation. Like I don't want us to have that uncertainty. And everyone really responds to that. And I will say across cultural barriers, I'm talking folks in many different age brackets, it has always been a successful thing when you come to, the conversation. I just want us to have the best possible outcome. No one is ever going to be negative about that. They may be hesitant, they may be unsure, they may not know what to say around it, but just start the conversation.
I think it also, like all things, when you push all of the decisions off on one partner, even if it's what's for dinner. I mean, something as simple as what's for dinner. Now you have all of this emotional burden that is on only one of the partners to make every decision it feels like you're being accommodating. It feels like you're showing trust, but you're deflecting that decision every single time. And it becomes an emotional burden on that one partner when they have to carry that weight by themselves. So financially, that can be a huge burden that your partner's carrying, and you don't realize how much it would benefit them as well for them to be able to share it and have another mind and a partner to really go over it with. And I think
100%.
in a healthy relationship that it's definitely going to be welcomed. Because you're
Yes.
right now you might feel defensive at first, like why? But if you start with the story that, I heard this terrible thing that happened, and then it's coming from a place of, yeah, I'm a little bit nervous that it could happen to me if something were to happen to you. And then that feels like a safer place rather than I'm getting all of our finances together. That kind of like, I need to see everything that's going on feels like
Yes.
such an attack. And from that perspective of it was so eye-opening for me to hear this terrible story. It's such a
Right.
much softer entrance into it. Do you often find when you have relationship financial consulting that you do that the person that's been carrying the burden feels very relieved?
Yes, absolutely. They do because there is that part of them where it's like, am I doing all the things? Am I covering everything? And just knowing that the other person wants to accept some of that responsibility as well. Like, it's a partnership. You're a team. And so, we have things that we prefer for sure and things that we understand better for our background or just the experience we've had when we are open to, let's learn this together. Like that's always something, when I'm meeting with couples, it's like, yeah, let's put the pieces together. And it's just another time in your life when you get that team feeling like I could do this better over here or we could do that. And so now you're building this thing together. And, to your point, it's just less stress. Like we have enough, right? In all
Mm.
areas. And so if we can help carry that burden, with each other and check in and help out in the ways that we can, just like, it seems more obvious with things like children, right? Like, if I was up all night, with a sick child, then, tomorrow you're going to help out and do other things. Those divisions seem more obvious, but it is very much the case, with the financial things as well. And so, having and to your point, the approach is really important. Obviously, you're not going to, start demanding, well, I don't feel like I know enough and, I need to be privy to all these things. But the approach, if it comes from, yes, I just really want us to be successful and I don't want us to be a statistic. I tell women all the time, many are surprised to learn that the average age of a widow is 59 years old. And so,
Wow.
that's crazy. And, there are
That's
some women
exactly
that
how old I am. I'm not married, but
yeah, no. So, often they think it's older and, there's a fair number of women that, I became a widow at 42. So there's some of us that,
ooh,
come in way younger
you're
than
bringing the
that.
average down, Anna.
Yeah, I know. But
But
that
that's what
is
happens. I mean, tragedies happen and thrust us into situations that we're not prepared for. And I think that in business, that leaders have that kind of same tendency to hoard responsibility and information. And then they're not getting all of the expertise involved that they can as well. I want to talk a minute about red flags. So let's say you're the partner that's asking the question and you get faced with not, yeah, sure, I understand. Yeah, we can do that. But then you start seeing red flags. What are some
Mhm.
of those red flags that might mean there's maybe hidden debt or spending that what should they look out for? What kinds of questions should we ask to make sure we get a full understanding?
Yeah, well, obviously the biggest red flag is hesitancy to participate, like maybe saying, "Yeah, yeah, we'll do that," and then, nothing is forthcoming as in, when were we going to sit down and look at, all the things that are coming in or looking at the bill. So that's your biggest one, like just, putting it off. And it may just be, seriously, they have a bunch of stuff going on, but, setting a date on the calendar and saying, okay, this is the day, that you don't have anything at this time, like it's mutually convenient and we're getting together and doing that. And then I think it becomes very clear when, it's like, so, as you're going through the accounts, you a whole list of, what kind of coverages do we have? What kind of, retirement accounts may you potentially have? If they're a business owner, then where, any expenses that are coming from the family that are being sent to the business. It's just really going, kind of line by line on, where things are at. And I think often people have a general idea, like, we generally know that we get this much income coming in every month and this is what goes out but you'd be really surprised how, and I find it more with folks that make more money, like the more they make, they just don't really designate it well and anything extra is just there and it just gets spent. It is so easy to spend it, right? Like that's the easy part. And
And
so
is it true that it's I think there's like statistics on this that let's say I do something and I'm saving myself $200 a month, that often I spend and add expenses that are $250 a month because I saved this amount that I don't really designate it or put it in savings. And then the rebound of how much I spend is actually more because I feel, I don't know, emboldened or brave or
yes, and I don't know that there's a specific statistic about it, but yeah, and then I think we think, okay, I'm saving 200 a month. So when you see something that you want, to your point, if it's 250, well, that's okay. I just, that just covers what I'm saving. But then, now you've got the extra 50, and yeah, that is so easy. Our minds trick us all the time, like, oh, you have enough, or I'm always amazed, like when like you go on a trip. I just recently got back from a trip and if you're not keeping track of how much you're spending, like it's really easy. It just adds up and you're like, "Whoa," halfway through the trip I was like, oh, "Okay." I had set kind of a budget for the and I'm like, "Wow, okay, I'm a little beyond half of it," just by
yeah,
checking
guess I'm
in.
gonna be skipping
Yeah.
breakfast for the rest of the trip, or I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
But it didn't feel like it necessarily, right? So it's just kind of checking in and seeing what that is. And that's why, I always encourage, having a savings account that you truly are like maybe without you even thinking about it. It already goes in there. So it's like an automatic thing that, you're not having to make the decision to do it or to put it or to forget or to not remember those type of things. The more things that you set up that automatic make that much easier. But when someone is not being truthful about everything, it's pretty easy. It comes to light, very quickly. And that's always my point. Like, how long would you want that to go on before you became aware of it? And that goes back to the importance of having the conversation, and even if there is something that's gone on that you haven't been made aware of, it's like, okay, well, now we're starting from here, and figuring that out moving forward is much better than that going on for 5 more years or whatever the case may be. And that's what happens when we keep our head in this. And that's often the fear is, what if I don't have enough? What if, there's a ton of what ifs, right? And I always say, the best time to find out about that is today. The next best time is tomorrow, right? So the sooner we figure that out, the better it's going to be for us.
And I think there are times, and there definitely were times when my now ex-husband was gambling, that I had little feelings or I saw something and I just avoided the conflict
Mhm.
rather than start that conversation again. And what are some tips someone who's struggling with that? For me, you really have to get grounded and bring in that confidence to be able to have that conversation. But I'm not the expert that you are in that. That's my mindset way of how I do all things that I need to be brave about.
Yeah.
So, what are some tips when you're starting to feel that sign that just broaching that conversation? Do you go back to I had this, read this story, or I saw this thing on Facebook again with that because it is such an emotional thing? It can break down that barrier.
Yeah, well, I think so. And I think it just all comes down to the one thing I would say is trust your gut. Like, if you are having that feeling, don't dismiss it. Don't be like, oh, it's just me being dramatic or whatever. If it's something that you're truly feeling, then there's a reason for that. And you want to honor that by saying, something's not feeling right. Again, I think in any situation, not coming off judgmental and accusatory is always going to help, but just something is off. I'm concerned, be honest. This isn't a fun conversation, but I feel like we got to figure out what's going on, and to yourself in preparation of that. Again, you deserve to know the truth. And so you want to find that out as soon as possible. Like, you could be in a position to really turn things around if it's the worst case scenario. And if it is the worst case scenario, the sooner you find out about it, the better it is. It's never going to be a fun topic, to your point, like, oh, I don't want to have this conversation again. Like, it's just going to create trouble and whatever. Well, if there really is a problem, there's going to be trouble, right? Regardless. And
And
so,
you're just delaying the trouble by not having the
exactly.
conversation. And the trouble builds like all things that get
Yeah.
delayed.
And you're stressing about it internally because something's up and you're not doing anything about it. And so, rip the band-aid off, do it in the best possible way. And, if there's blame and all that other stuff, you're going to deal with that as it comes. But just really coming from a place of, I really need to know, we both deserve to know what's truly going on. And we're not going to be able to fix it or better our situation until we have the conversation. And so, I'm coming to you in that spirit of, we got to fix this.
So if there's someone out there, and I realize there's a lot of gaslighting, there's a lot of no, everything's fine.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
when there are problems, that's what you hear because the other person's afraid to admit and to have the conversation too for obvious reasons.
Mhm.
So let's say we have someone out there right now that isn't aware of what's going on, and now they're faced with a life-changing thing that happens. What are the first steps they need to make to figure out what is happening in their financial? Like, how do they find out if they even have life? And maybe they don't even know if they have life insurance or what kind of accounts they have. Sounds like a lot of like legwork to me to figure it out. So, where's like a first place for them to start?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanna say hopefully you have some sort of a person in your life that deals with financial things, and it would be good to, check with them and see, how do I find I mean, usually with life insurance, everyone one of you knows that you've applied for it and, where do you keep those things, together. Hopefully there's some sort of a file box or something where you keep this stuff and, kind of go through it together and discover that. I find that people have bought coverage in the past, but you forget, like, it's 4 or 5 years ago. How much coverage is there? When does it, can we upgrade? What kind is it? All of those things, like we really honestly forget. And so it's something that you need to be checking on, like on a yearly basis. But if you haven't, then, where do we put that paperwork and start on the hunt for that so that you can find it together. Usually again, it's a team effort. Like, oh, I keep papers here and oh, I didn't even know that, that file box existed. And then obviously moving forward, really important to keep track of those things. I encourage people to have a folder, an in case folder, right? Where all of those things are, but just your obvious things like, what kind of accounts are open, any kind of, retirement accounts that you have, life insurance coverages, all of those things hopefully are listed somewhere. But if they're
Somewhere.
not, this is your call to action to realize that you're not benefiting from those things if you don't know what you have, who they're with. If something happened, how would you contact them? Those are all things that you made that purchase of those things however long ago because they were valuable to you and you saw that there was something in them that you needed, but you're not getting the full value if you don't know what they are and where they even are. And so, this is your call to action to let's gather that paperwork. That's often the first step, with people that I meet with, like, let's get those things, those accounts together. Sometimes, you've had 2 and 3 other jobs prior to the one that you have, and you have money in old 401ks. Like that's another thing, what are we
And you
doing
have to
with
really
that?
search for that too. If the horrible thing has happened and your spouse has passed away, now you're looking back at all of the old employers trying to find all of those things. And I do think you can contact your state insurance
You
bureau.
can.
There's usually an overall agency and they have a way of searching for life insurance policies.
But it's time consuming and they can, yes, they can, but it's much easier. In old accounts, like, if the spouse has passed away, how do you access that? You're not going to have the passwords most likely, which is another reason why having a list of
Mm.
those is very, very helpful. And there are a variety of ways to do that. There's some companies that help you digitize that, but I give people the option to or the recommendation to do some of those things, but you can create your own if you don't wanna do that, make your own list, but
Make
that
the
is all
list.
very important.
Make the list. Have the conversation. Have the scary conversation.
Yes.
Even if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a stay-at-home dad or you're you're not the one that takes care of it, it is important. And I think your partner doesn't want you to be stuck if
No,
something happens to them. They may be
no.
scared to have the conversation too, but it's not always nefarious. So be
And I can
open, find out if they are nefarious. It's the only way you're going to find out. Do that. And the same is true with businesses. Don't be in a tunnel. If you're even an upper executive and you don't understand the financial situation of the company, it's really important that you do that so you understand those lessons as well. Well,
absolutely.
Anna, I thoroughly have enjoyed our conversation, and it is such an important conversation to have for people that not just women, but men too, and for the person that's bearing all of the heavy weight,
Mhm.
making all of those decisions alone. It's so much easier when you have a team and a partnership than it is that. And you gave us great advice. I'm certain that everyone out there wants to know how they can get in touch with you and learn more about how your services work. So please explore that with us.
Yes, absolutely. So it's as easy as going to my website, just my name, Anna, Anna Felix, Felix.com. And there you can schedule a time with me. And I do it that way because number one, there's no cost to meet with me. So I always want to make it easy for people to do that. No entry to worry about. And then we can just have a conversation and see, how I can help you. If I can help you, I'll tell you if I can't. Wherever you are in life, right? Like if you're starting off, I love working with young ones that really wanting to get things going, right from the get-go and get them done correctly. That's cool. But, in every decade, we're in a different place. Maybe we already have a plan in place, but you're not sure if it's enough or, where all the pieces fit together. Wherever you are, feel free to schedule a time, and that's all it requires. We get together, you pick a time that works for you, and we can explore, where you are. No hidden agendas, no judgment of any kind. Like, you got to start somewhere, right? I always tell people, do not worry about it. Sometimes most of the time people think that they're in a worse position than they are. But even if you are, going back to my same point, how soon do you want to know that? The sooner you know it, the sooner you can fix it. So we'll have a conversation, see if we're a good fit, and then see how I can help you.
Fantastic. Well, if this conversation resonates with you, if it changed how you think about leadership, decision making, the patterns in your financial life, or how you run your business, then my work lives beyond this podcast in your growth. Thank you. My work focuses on helping leaders and organizations slow down, identify what's actually breaking beneath the surface, and build sustainable growth grounded in clarity, trust, and alignment. You can learn more about that work at thegrowthvanguard.com. And if you're interested in going deeper, I've included links in the show notes to download resources like the Human Cells Playbook and 5 Signs Your Growth is Breaking. Links to all of those and to all of Anna's information will be there in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to follow and subscribe to Deals with Heels so you don't miss what's ahead. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends. And if you're feeling very generous, please leave us a review. And it's been so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Until next time, everyone, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. See you next time.